Amarjeet Sada. The name sends shivers down your spine. A name synonymous with the unthinkable, the incomprehensible. A child, barely old enough to understand life, yet accused of taking it not once but thrice. How does a child, barely past infancy himself, become the embodiment of pure evil? This is the chilling story of Amarjeet Sada, the boy who played death. Born in 1998 in the impoverished hinterlands of Bihar, India, Amarjeet's life was a study in contrasts. Surrounded by the vibrancy of village life, he was an enigma, a quiet, withdrawn presence. His silence was more unsettling than a storm, his gaze more haunting than any nightmare. Little did anyone know, a storm brewed within him, a maelstrom of darkness that would soon spill over, staining his world crimson. This is not just a story about Amarjeet Sada, the killer. This is a story about the darkness that can fester in the human heart, regardless of age. It is a story about the failures of society, the thin veil between sanity and madness, and the chilling reminder that sometimes monsters walk among us, cloaked in the faces of children. Bihar, situated in eastern India, is a land of stark contrasts. Lush green fields paint a deceptive picture of serenity, masking the harsh realities of poverty, illiteracy, and crime that plague its underbelly. Life here is a constant struggle for survival, a daily battle against the odds. For many, hope is a luxury they cannot afford. Amarjeet was born into this unforgiving environment. His family, impoverished and marginalized, lived on the fringes of society. Their existence a constant struggle for basic necessities. Their small, mud brick house, a testament to their poverty, stood as a stark symbol of their plight. Inside its cramped confines, darkness thrived, both literally and metaphorically. The weight of poverty pressed heavily upon Amarjeet's young shoulders. Malnutrition cast a pallor over his face, and his eyes, windows to his troubled soul, held a disturbing emptiness. The laughter of children playing in the dusty streets held no joy for him, their games a language he did not speak. He was a solitary figure, lost in a world of his own making, a world where shadows whispered and nightmares danced in broad daylight. Even in the poorest corners of Bihar, word travels fast. Whispers about Amarjeet began to circulate, carried on the wind like dust devils across the parched land. Villagers spoke in hushed tones of his strange behavior, his vacant stare, his unnerving silence. Mothers pulled their children closer when he passed, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and pity. There were disturbing incidents, subtle at first, that hinted at the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. Animals, stray dogs, and birds were found brutally killed near his home, their small bodies bearing the marks of unimaginable cruelty. When questioned, Amarjeet remained impassive, his silence more chilling than any confession. His parents, trapped in their own cycle of poverty and despair, seemed oblivious to the warning signs. Or perhaps they chose to ignore them, blinded by a parent's desperate hope. They dismissed his behavior as childish pranks, harmless acts of a boy who didn't know any better. But the villagers knew deep down that something was terribly wrong. A seed of evil had been planted, and it was growing, nurtured by neglect and indifference, waiting for the opportune moment to bloom. In 2006, a chilling chapter unfolded in Amarjeet's story, marking a descent from mere suspicion to undeniable horror. His cousin, just 6 months old, disappeared without a trace. The family's desperate search filled the village with cries of anguish, yet the child remained missing. Days later, the unspeakable happened. Hidden under a pile of dry leaves in a field, the infant's body was found, strangled. The tiny face, contorted in a silent scream, bore witness to the agony endured in those final moments. As fear and anger swept through the village, suspicions quickly turned to Amarjeet. Seen near where the child was found, his silence now seemed a sign of guilt. Faced with this grim reality, his parents could no longer deny the truth. The whispers were true. Amarjeet had unleashed the monster within. The burden of their son's deeds weighed heavily on the Sada family, enveloping them in a shroud of shame and fear. Once pitied for their poverty, they now faced the community's suspicion and hostility. Ostracized, they remained silent, their expressions a complex tapestry of shame, fear, and perhaps guilt. Had they failed to see the darkness growing within Amarjeet? Were there signs they had missed or chosen to ignore, hoping they were merely figments of imagination? The truth, sealed within the walls of their crumbling home, transformed the Sadas from a typical struggling family into a symbol of unspeakable horror. Their story, a whispered cautionary tale of the monsters that are born, not made. A year later, as the village of Mushahari struggled to heal, another tragedy shattered any semblance of peace. In 2007, Khushbu, an 8-month-old girl, vanished while her mother toiled in the fields. The village, engulfed in panic, searched desperately, only to find Khushbu's body marked by the same horrific signs as the previous victims. As the community reeled in shock, the authorities, driven by the urgent need to solve the case, zeroed in once again on Amarjeet Sada. The boy, previously overlooked due to his age, was now the undeniable suspect. The villagers, a mix of anger and fear on their faces, watched as police led away the small, unrepentant figure.